They were trapped, not by walls, not by mountains, but by men. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers stood in a tight mass under the burning sun. Dust filled the air. The sound of shields knocking together echoed like thunder. They could not move forward. They could not move back. All around them, the enemy was closing in, slowly, silently, and then, at once, the circle tightened. This was the moment Rome had never imagined. This was the moment everything went wrong. But how did the most powerful army in the world walk straight into a trap they could not escape? To understand that, we must go back. Years before that deadly morning, a man stood before his father and made a promise. His name was Hannibal. He was not Roman. He was Carthaginian. And as a boy, he swore an oath he would never be a friend to Rome. Rome and Carthage were already enemies. They had fought before, but this time would be different. This time, the war would come to Rome itself. Hannibal grew into a brilliant general. He studied battle like a puzzle. He watched how armies moved, how they broke, how they survived. He did not think like other commanders. He thought ahead, always ahead, and when the time came, he made a decision no one expected. He would not attack Rome by sea. He would go by land, through mountains no army had crossed before. The Alps. Snow covered the peaks. The paths were narrow and dangerous. Many said it was impossible. Hannibal did not agree. With tens of thousands of soldiers, horses, and even elephants, he began the journey. The cold was brutal. The air was thin. Men slipped on ice. Some never made it through. But Hannibal kept moving, step by step. Day by day. When he finally came down from the mountains into Italy, Rome was shocked. No one believed an army could come that way. But there he was, alive, ready, and dangerous. At first, Rome was confident. They had the strongest army in the world. They believed no enemy could stand against them. They were wrong. Hannibal began to win. Battle after battle, he outsmarted Roman generals. He moved faster. He struck where they did not expect. At the Trebia River, Roman soldiers rushed into freezing water to attack. They were tired and cold before the fight even began. At Lake Trasimene, he hid his army in the hills. When the Romans marched through the narrow path, the attack came from all sides. Still, the Romans refused to give up. They believed the solution was simple. More soldiers, more force, more pressure. The place was called Cannae, a wide, open plain in southern Italy. Flat land, perfect for a large army, perfect for Rome. They gathered one of the biggest forces they had ever assembled. Around 80,000 soldiers, infantry packed tightly together, cavalry on the sides. Across the field, Hannibal stood with far fewer men. Around 50,000, less than Rome, less strength, less numbers, but more understanding. The morning of the battle was hot. The wind blew dust into the faces of the Roman soldiers. In the center, he placed his weaker infantry. They stood slightly forward, forming a curved line. Behind them, stronger soldiers waited. The Roman army moved forward, thousands of boots hitting the ground at once. The noise was deafening. They crashed into Hannibal's center. At first, it worked. The Carthaginian center began to fall back. Slowly, carefully, the curved line of Hannibal's center bent inward, like a bow being pulled. The Romans followed. They packed tighter and tighter together. Hannibal gave the signal. His strong troops on the sides moved inward, like doors closing. At the same time, his cavalry defeated the Roman cavalry on the flanks and came around behind. The Romans did not realize what was happening. Not yet. Until suddenly they looked around and saw it. They were surrounded. The trap had closed. The greatest army Rome had ever sent into battle was now caught in a perfect circle. Hannibal had turned Rome's strength into its weakness. But what happened next would become one of the most shocking moments in history. Who, if anyone, would survive what came next? The circle closed. Slowly at first, then all at once. Roman soldiers turned their heads in every direction. Front, left, right, behind. Everywhere they looked, there were enemy shields. The dust in the air grew thicker. The sun burned hotter. The noise became louder, but also more confusing shouts, commands, fear. They had marched forward with confidence. Now, they could not move at all. At first, Many did not understand. Roman soldiers were trained to push forward, to break enemy lines, to win through strength and discipline. But this was different. There was no open space, no clear enemy line, only pressure from every side. Men were packed so tightly that they could barely lift their arms. Shields pressed into backs. Swords had no room to swing. The army that had once looked so powerful now looked like a trapped crowd. And still, the officers shouted, "Push forward." But forward no longer existed. Outside the circle, Hannibal watched, calm, focused. He did not rush. He knew the trap was working. Every movement had been planned. Every step had been measured. He had studied the Romans, how they fought, how they thought, how they reacted. And now, they were doing exactly what he expected. Inside the circle, confusion spread like fire. Some Roman soldiers tried to turn and fight their way out. Others pushed deeper into the center, hoping to break through. But there was no weak point. The Carthaginian soldiers held firm. They did not panic. They did not break. They tightened the ring. The Roman cavalry was gone. Defeated on the edges of the battlefield, they could not return to help. That meant no escape from the sides, no rescue, no second chance. The Roman commanders Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro tried to regain control. They shouted orders. They tried to reorganize the lines. But how do you lead an army that cannot even move? How do you give commands when your soldiers cannot hear you? The noise swallowed everything. Time passed. Minutes felt like hours. The heat became unbearable. The dust made it hard to see. The air grew heavy. Inside the circle, the pressure increased. Men stumbled. When one fell, there was no space to rise again. The crowd closed over him. The Roman army, once so organized, was now breaking apart from within, not because of a single strike, but because of the trap. Hannibal gave another signal. His soldiers began to push inward, slowly, carefully, not rushing. They knew the Romans were already trapped. There was no need to hurry. The smaller Carthaginian force now had the advantage. They had space. They could move. They could strike and step back. The Romans could not. Some Roman soldiers began to understand. This was not a normal battle. This was something else. A plan, a design, a trap, set long before the first sword was raised. And they had walked right into it. The center of the Roman army became the worst place to be. Thousands of men crushed together. No room to breathe. No room to fight. No room to escape. Panic spread. Some dropped their weapons. Some shouted for help. Some simply stood frozen. The strongest army in the world was now helpless. Outside the circle, Hannibal's officers watched in silence. They had seen many battles, but nothing like this. This was not just victory. This was control, total control. Hannibal was not just defeating Rome. He was showing that Rome could be outhopped, outmaneuvered, outplayed. As the circle tightened, the Roman commanders faced a terrible truth. There would be no breakthrough, no sudden victory, no escape. The army was lost. Lucius Aemilius Paulus, one of the commanders, stayed with his soldiers. He did not run. He did not abandon them. He stood among them, knowing what was coming. Gaius Terentius Varro, the other commander, managed to escape with a small group of cavalry. Some would later blame him. Others would say he had no choice. But inside the circle, most had no choice at all. The sun climbed higher. The heat grew stronger. The noise slowly changed. Less shouting, more silence. The kind of silence that comes when hope begins to fade. Hour after hour, the Romans weakened, not from a single blow, but from being trapped. From being unable to fight the way they were trained. From being unable to breathe, to move, to think clearly. Hannibal had not just attacked their bodies. He had broken their system. By the afternoon, it was clear. This was not just a defeat. This was a disaster, one of the greatest in Roman history. Tens of thousands of soldiers were still inside the circle, and the circle was still closing. Far away, in the city of Rome, no one yet knew what was happening. They believed their army would win. They believed Hannibal would finally be stopped. They believed this battle would end the war. But the truth was very different. As the sun began to fall toward the horizon, the battlefield of Cannae was no longer a place of movement. It was a place of stillness, the kind that follows something terrible, the kind that history never forgets. Hannibal stood and looked across the field. He had done what no one thought possible. He had trapped and defeated one of the largest armies Rome had ever raised. But a question remained, a dangerous question, one that even his own officers whispered about. If Rome had been broken so completely, if its greatest army had been destroyed, then why not march on Rome itself? Why not end it all, right now? Hannibal looked toward the north, toward the city that had sworn to destroy him, and for a moment, he did nothing. The battlefield was silent. Where thousands had once marched with confidence, nothing moved. The dust slowly settled over the plains of Cannae. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the ground. Hannibal had done the impossible. He had surrounded and defeated one of the largest armies Rome had ever gathered. It was not just a victory, it was one of the greatest military achievements in history. But as the silence grew, a strange question began to rise. If Hannibal had broken Rome's army, why did Rome not fall? Messengers raced north, fast, relentless, toward the city of Rome. When the news arrived, the city froze. At first, people did not believe it. It was too shocking, too impossible. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers gone, leaders lost, the army destroyed, the strongest power in the world, defeated in a single day. Fear spread quickly. Parents held their children close. Senators gathered in silence. Some believed Hannibal would arrive at the gates any moment. This was it, the end of Rome. But Hannibal did not march on the city. Days passed, then weeks. Still, no attack. Inside his camp, even his own officers questioned him. One of them, Hannibal, is said to have spoken boldly. "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but not how to use it." It was a powerful statement, and a dangerous one. Why didn't Hannibal finish it? The truth is not simple. Hannibal's army had won, but it was tired. They had marched for years. They had crossed mountains, fought battles, lost men. They were far from home. They did not have the equipment to siege a massive city like Rome. Rome was not just another target. It was protected by strong walls, deep defenses, and a population ready to fight for survival. And most importantly, Rome was not alone. Even after Cannae, Rome still had allies, still had resources. Hannibal had destroyed an army, but he had not destroyed Rome itself. Back in the city, something unexpected happened. Rome did not surrender. Rome did not collapse. Rome adapted. The Senate refused to panic. They refused to negotiate peace. Instead, they made a bold decision. They would not fight Hannibal the same way again. No more large battles. No more rushing into traps. Instead, they chose patience. They would weaken Hannibal slowly, cut off his supplies, avoid direct confrontation. This strategy became known as the Fabian strategy, named after a Roman leader who believed time could defeat even the strongest enemy. Hannibal remained in Italy for years. He moved from place to place, winning smaller battles, gaining support from some cities, but never enough. Never enough to break Rome completely. Rome rebuilt its armies, again and again. Then, Rome changed the war. Instead of only defending, they took the fight to Carthage itself. A Roman general named Scipio Africanus rose to power. He studied Hannibal, learned from him, and then, he turned them against him. Scipio attacked Carthaginian lands in North Africa. This forced Hannibal to leave Italy. The final battle came in 202 BC, at Zama. This time, the roles were reversed. Hannibal faced a Roman army led by a general who understood his strategies. The battle was close, but in the end Hannibal lost. Carthage was defeated. Rome had survived. Not just survived, it had grown stronger. The victory at Cannae, one of the greatest in history, had not ended the war. It had only changed it. The answers are complex, because history is not just about battles. It is about endurance. Rome learned from defeat. It changed its strategies. It refused to give up. And in doing so, it proved something powerful. A single loss, no matter how great, does not always decide the future. The fields of Cannae returned to silence. Grass grew where armies once stood. The dust settled. Hannibal's name would live forever, a symbol of brilliance, of bold strategy. And Rome? Rome would go on to build an empire that shaped the world. But it would never forget Cannae, because even the strongest power in history had once been surrounded, and for a moment, almost lost everything. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more historical documentary.